You may know by now that sexuality, including asexuality, is a spectrum, since it was mentioned in the first video. But did you also know that libido, sexual desire, sexual attraction, and gender are spectrums too? Like many things that occur in nature, sexuality is a spectrum. This means that instead of there only being two sexual orientations, heterosexual and homosexual, a continuum exists where those who are exclusively heterosexual are on one side, and those who are exclusively homosexual are on the other. This is illustrated by the Kinsey scale. In the 1940s, Dr. Alfred Kinsey created a scale ranging from 0 to 6 in order to display this continuum. Placement of 0 meant one was exclusively heterosexual, 6 corresponded to exclusively homosexual, and 1 to 5 represented varying degrees of bisexuality. Upon looking at this diagram, you'll see that asexuality is not included. However, Kinsey didn't forget about the asexuals. He designated a separate category which he labeled X for those who were not aroused by men or women. In modern times, category X has come to be associated with those who identify as asexual. Asexuality, like other forms of sexuality, is a spectrum itself, ranging from people who experience absolutely no sexual attraction to people who do experience sexual attraction, though still identify with the asexual community due to their attractions being infrequent or a low sex drive. The part of the spectrum that includes some form of sexual attraction is known as the gray area, and it encompasses those who are not strictly asexual, but still feel at odds with the rest of sexual society and identify closely with the asexual community. People who fall into this gray area generally identify as gray-sexual, gray-asexual, or gray-A. Gray-asexuality is an umbrella term that includes those who rarely experience sexual attraction, or only experience sexual attraction under specific circumstances, experience sexual attraction but lack any desire to engage in sexual activity, experience sexual attraction but have a low sex drive, or do not experience sexual attraction but have a desire to engage in partnered sexual activity. One commonly known subcategory of gray-asexuality is demisexuality. Demisexuals are those who can only experience sexual attraction toward a person after a strong emotional bond has been formed. Unlike those who are sexually conservative and monogamous, demisexuals simply do not experience primary sexual attraction. In other words, they cannot be sexually attracted to strangers or acquaintances at all. Those who are sexually conservative, on the other hand, can experience that primary sexual attraction, but may choose not to act on it, or may see it as unimportant. As was previously mentioned, libido, or sex drive, is separate from sexual attraction. Asexuals and those in the asexual spectrum have the same variation in libido as the rest of the population, and levels of libido can range anywhere from very high to non-existent. For asexuals, this libido is not directed toward any particular person, and having a libido does not lead to a desire for sex. Thus, they do not experience sexual attraction or a directed libido. So what exactly does that mean, directed libido? Why use that term to define sexual attraction? One reason is that the term sexual attraction is quite ambiguous. It's not clearly defined. Another reason is that the term directed libido just works. It is, in essence, what separates asexuals with a sex drive from non-asexuals. Someone who does not experience a drive to engage in sexual acts with another person in response to hearing, seeing, or interacting with them most likely does not experience sexual attraction. In other words, their libido is not activated in direct response to being around a specific person. Sexual attraction can lead to sexual desire, which is the desire to engage in sexual activity with another person. However, sexual attraction does not always have to lead to sexual desire. Unlike most people who experience sexual attraction, some people who experience sexual attraction never or rarely experience the desire to engage in partnered sexual activity. Of course, the reverse is also true. There are those who rarely or never experience sexual attraction, yet still desire to engage in sexual activity with another person, for whatever reason. This is different from an asexual compromising on sexual activity for the pleasure of their non-asexual partner, but rather, this is the case where someone who does not experience sexual attraction still desires to engage in sexual activity with another person, and this can fall under the gray area. Most of the things encompassed within sexuality are spectrums. This includes gender. Without gender, the concepts of sexual orientation, sexual attraction, and sexual desire would lose their meaning for most people. Because the majority of people experience attraction based on another person's gender, the concept of gender is crucial to understanding the different kinds of sexuality and attraction. Before we discuss gender, however, an important distinction must be made: the distinction between gender and sex. One's sex is biological and includes features such as sex chromosomes, reproductive systems, and external genitalia, as well as several other factors. For most people, their sex is either male or female. However, there is a small group of people whose biological sex is not clearly identifiable at birth, meaning they have a mix of female and male characteristics. These people are known as intersex. Gender, on the other hand, is internal, and is generally more complicated and fluid than biological sex. It is how one perceives and identifies themselves, and is often, ultimately, how one will express their gender, whether it be in a more masculine, feminine, neutral, androgynous, or other form. Many see themselves as either distinctively female or male, and if their gender aligns with the sex they were born with, they are considered to be cisgender. Anyone who doesn't identify with the sex or gender they were assigned at birth is considered transgender. And this can include people who identify with the opposite gender as their biological sex, as well as people who don't identify on the gender binary, which separates gender into categories of male and female. Genderqueer is the umbrella term for anyone who does not identify on the gender binary. This can include people who have an overlap of gender identity and orientations, identify with two or more genders, identify as being without a gender, move between genders, or whose gender fluctuates, or do not place a name to their gender. Now, this is a lot of information to take in all at once, and you may be thinking that half of this is useless, and that labels are unnecessary anyway. However, recognizing that fluid spectrums exist for sexuality, attraction, and gender is useful, especially for those who don't fit neatly into one of two categories, for those aspects of their lives. All of these labels and terms help to explain these feelings and experiences, and help to validate them as real to people who'd rather impose their own worldview onto those who don't fit perfectly into these rigid binaries. This enables the creation of communities which are built on these experiences and the terms and labels used to describe these experiences. Doing this doesn't invalidate and threaten those who do experience sexuality, attraction, and gender in a black and white way. What it does do is acknowledge the vast diversity of experiences that all living beings can and do experience, whether it's in a black and white, gray, rainbow, colorless, or any other way. If anything, it strengthens our relationships with those who are different from us, helping us to understand each other, challenging our perspectives and preconceived notions, and ultimately, aiding us in accepting each other. In this episode, we discussed how sexuality is a spectrum, how asexuality is a spectrum, which includes gray-asexuality and demisexuality, how libido is separate from sexual attraction, and how asexuals can have varying degrees of libido, how sexual attraction is defined, how it is different from and can lead to sexual desire, difference between gender and sex, and finally, what gender is and what some of the different types of gender identities are. As always, feel free to leave any questions you have about asexuality in the comments below, and our team will do our best to answer each of those questions individually. We will continue to post new videos every Friday, so make sure to subscribe to be updated on new postings. And remember, everything's A-OK.